So it's now official. President Obama, for the third or fourth time now, has announced that he's keeping troops in Afghanistan longer. And this time, it's no more foreplay. He's going to leave office with troops still there. So as of right now, there's 9,800 troops still there, and he's saying that he's going to leave in at least 5,500. So Huffington Post reports on this, quote, Obama had originally planned to pull out all but a small embassy-based U.S. military presence by the end of next year, a timeline coinciding with the final weeks of his presidency, but military leaders argued for months that the Afghans needed additional assistance and support from the U.S. to beat back a resurgent Taliban and hold on to gains made over the last 14 years of American bloodshed and billions of dollars in aid. Officials said Obama will outline plans to maintain the current force of 9,800 troops in Afghanistan through most of next year and then draw down to 5,500 troops in 2017. So, of course, recently the Taliban took over the city of Kunduz, and that led to reevaluation in the U.S. saying, well, maybe we should stay there. But apparently us bombing a hospital didn't make us reevaluate and go, well, actually, maybe we should get out of there. So here's my favorite part of the article. Listen to this. Quote, upending the troop withdrawal decision, however, carries broad political implications. Obama campaigned for the White House on a pledge to end America's involvement in the two wars he inherited, Iraq and Afghanistan. Now he'll likely finish his presidency with troops back in both countries. Yeah. So Iraq and Afghanistan will now go down in history as Obama's Vietnams. Let me ask a very basic question. What are we gaining from staying there? What is victory? What would constitute a situation where the U.S. would say, we're going to declare victory and get the fuck out? Can anybody who's in favor of the war define what victory is? I know what they originally said, even going back to the Bush administration. I know what they originally said is the reason we're going in there and what would equal victory back in 2001. You guys remember? Or I should say 02, 03. You remember what it was? They said, well, the problem is the Taliban is giving shelter to Osama bin Laden and al-qaeda. So all we need to do to get back for 9/11, so there's a reason for it, all we need to do is go in there, defeat al-qaeda, and then we're out. And then we declare victory. The original argument wasn't we need to stay there, defeat al-qaeda and the Taliban, because the Taliban is a guerrilla army. Al-Qaeda is a international jihadist network that wants to take over the globe. Whether or not they could do that is a separate question, but that's their goal. Whereas the Taliban, it's more nationalistic and specific to the region. That's why they exist, and that's why they do what they do. Horrible people. They're Islamists through and through. They want to implement Sharia. They're a horrific group, but they don't have international ambitions. And they're not saying, hey, we're going to attack the U.S., and oh, look, the U.S. discovered plans of them attacking in Seattle in November or some shit. No, that's not what they are. So we go in there, we knock out al-Qaeda. Now, somebody like me, I think we could have done it a different way. That would have been a rare time where I would have said, yeah, to get back for 9/11, you want to knock out al-Qaeda, go ahead, but let's do it smart. Let's either use special forces or go through the proper legal channels and use limited drone strikes to get al-Qaeda. I would have been fine with it there, but I would have been out very quickly within a year. These guys said, no, let's do an invasion. And then after we knocked out al-Qaeda, they go, hey, what are you guys doing? Why are you still there? Well, we defeated al-Qaeda. And now, I mean, the Taliban's still here. We don't really like these guys, the Taliban, even though they're not a direct military threat to the United States of America. So this isn't about self-defense anymore. But, okay, we're just going to stay here and fight these guys because fuck them, they're bad dudes. So you move the goalposts. That's exactly what you did, is you move the goalposts. Now, we're familiar with them moving the goalposts in other contexts, too. What did they do in Iraq? They said in Iraq, well, the problem is Saddam Hussein did 9/11. We learned that wasn't true. Then they just moved the goalposts. Well, he has weapons of mass destruction. That wasn't true either. And also the idea that he'd use them if he had them on us immediately, totally made up. And then they move the goalposts again to he's just a bad guy. And there's a lot of fucking bad guys out there. You were his ally when he was doing his worst atrocities against the Kurds. People forget to mention that. We armed him and we were his buddy when he was doing his worst atrocities against the Kurds and against Iran. So if he's a bad guy, that's not a reason to go in there and do a war. I mean, there are bad guys in South Sudan. There are bad guys in the Congo. There's a bad guy in North Korea. There are bad guys who are our allies. The Saudi government is one of the worst governments in the world. But we don't use that as, oh my God, they're beheading people for drug use and sorcery. Let's go topple the government and put in, a puppet dictator. Why is that argument only specifically applied to areas where it just so happens you have some other geopolitical reason to be in there? No, guys, this is not about what they say it's about. This isn't about protecting us, and this certainly isn't about altruism and spreading democracy. If we wanted to spread democracy, we would actually have democratic regimes in the places where we invade. Usually we invade, and then we put a fucking authoritarian in there. So this is just absolute, out-and-out imperialism. Even under a Democratic president who's supposed to be anti-war, he's like, well, I mean, come on, we can have some troops there, and we can stay as long as we want, really. Why? Why? And ask the American people what they want to do. Guys, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying if we pull out of Afghanistan, well, everything's going to be hunky-dory and it'll be a utopia there and there'll be rainbows and everybody gets a puppy. That's not what I'm saying at all. Perhaps the region totally devolves into chaos. But what does that have to do with us any more than the chaos in South Sudan has to do with us or any more than the chaos in the Congo has to do with us? And usually, guys, history is more complicated than just one side's pure good, one side's pure evil, and, we need to go in to prevent a genocide. Oftentimes, there are complex factors that go into wars, and both sides are shitty people, and both sides have some good people. And in Afghanistan, for example, we just covered the story about how our fucking allies were raping children, and our military would let them get away with it because they're our allies. This isn't about morality. This isn't about civil liberties. This isn't about human rights. This isn't about spreading democracy. It's about a permanent occupation of a country. And let's not forget, a lot of people get very, very rich off of the war. This is the military-industrial complex. That's not my opinion. That's a fact. All you have to do is look at the numbers and it's clear. I'm not saying that's the primary motive for why we do what we do. But oftentimes, historically, we've found that whenever one country views itself as above other nations and protecting world peace and being the leader, there's always ulterior motives where they might rationalize, oh, we're the good guys, but behind the scenes, there's a lot of fucked up shit going on. And that's not really the prime motivation. So this is absolutely unacceptable. And sorry, guys, but these wars are now Obama's Vietnams. Did you know the war in Afghanistan was less popular, according to a recent poll from about a year ago? It's less popular than the war in Vietnam was at its most unpopular point. Afghanistan is less popular than Vietnam, and Obama's like, yeah, I guess we're still going to stay there. Why? Why would you do that? We don't want to be there. We don't have any further interest in the region. There's less than 100 al-Qaeda guys there. Why would you continue to stay there? And a lot of this also has to do with his generals and the military brass talking his ear off, just like they did with all the other presidents during Vietnam. LBJ, we learned that he wanted to get out of it, but all of his generals would tell him, you can't get out of it. You just can't get out of it, because if we leave, this bad thing happens, that bad thing happens, that bad thing happens. We can't let that happen. But he stayed there, and then what ended up happening? That's the worst part of his legacy. He would have a much better legacy if he didn't stay in Vietnam, because he was doing the war on poverty, and he was doing some decent stuff domestically. But that tarnished his legacy because he listened to the military guys, who shockingly see a military solution to fucking everything. So it's just, Obama should fucking know better, man. You should know better. You were elected for a reason. This is supposed to be a democracy. If we're not talking about a constitutional issue, which is off the table, then you are supposed to listen to the will of the people. And you're simply not doing that. Yes, Bush gets the blame for starting the wars, but 100% Obama gets the blame for continuing the wars.